Yesterday, I made a video about how software startups, specifically VC-backed software companies, are going to have a tough time with AI for a number of reasons. What I will say though is that AI is going to make it much easier for hardware startups to succeed. And I have a few opinions on that, or a few reasons for that. First of all, the thing with hardware that is really helpful is the fact that it's very hard to copy, right? There are enormous amounts of costs that go into actually starting a hard tech startup. For instance, if you want to start, some sort of a chip startup, and you want to compete with NVIDIA, the reality is you're going to have to do probably 2 or 3 years at least of research and development to actually go ahead and release your product. Furthermore, I think it's much easier to patent hardware than it is to patent software. And so for that reason, once the product's actually developed, you don't have to worry about, or it's not as much of a risk to have your product be copied by someone else. It's very, very challenging to do for a number of reasons. Second of all, oh, and another point on that before I go on to the next point, you need really exceptional talent to run a hard tech startup, right? So think about a company like NVIDIA, right? Their staff are highly, highly, highly specialized, right? Like they're extreme, like they're the best at what they do. And, you know, the same can be said for hard tech startups, right? Like it's very hard to compete with a hard tech startup because you would need to find the top 1% of the top 1% of engineers to come and work with you to even have a chance to compete, right? Just have a chance to compete. You would need the best of the best engineers in the world. And so it's very challenging to do. It's not something that you can, you know, my point is you don't have to worry about competition as much, right? For those reasons that I just mentioned. The other thing I would say when it comes to hard tech startups is that AI actually speeds up development, right? So when it comes to things like writing the code for, the hard tech that you're building, you don't have to worry as much about the software component, right? So you're actually cutting you're actually making it a lot faster to develop these products because you now no longer have to worry about designing the software architecture around it. Or at least in the next few years, we can get to that point, right? So now you only have to worry about hardware. And then there's another component of compliance, right? So what are the legal structures um, that are sort of the barriers to growth for a lot of these hard tech startups, right? Like regulations, legal work, that kind of stuff. And I would argue that AI, again, is going to make those processes a lot faster. In fact, I think that there are actually a few startups coming up, some of which already exist, that automate compliance work. And so instead of something taking, 6 months to do with respect to compliance, you can actually get it done in a week, right? And so you can see how, AI is making it so much easier for these companies to exist and really to only focus on the hardware component of it, right? So before, if you wanted to start a hardware company, it's like, okay, you have to worry about the hardware, and then you have to worry about the software, and then you have to worry about the legal stuff. But now those second two, like the second and third one, are largely going to be automated by AI. And so hard tech is really going to, or excuse me, hardware is really what's going to be focused on a lot more. And I'll also say this, and I suppose this is another component that I just realized right now. Um, you're probably going to get more people who are going to be interested in hardware compared to software because of the fact that a lot of these software engineering jobs are slowly going to be automated away, right? So, in other words, 10 years ago, the smartest people in the world, would go to, these really prestigious universities and study computer science because they knew that if they were to graduate, they would go and work at Meta or Alphabet or Amazon, making hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. But that doesn't seem to be as much of an option anymore, right? It's become a lot more competitive. Even the supply of those jobs has gone down. And so what could happen, which is possible, is that these really intelligent people who are just amazing at math, amazing at science, amazing at English, are going to pursue, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, um, aerodynamic, um, is that what it's called? Sorry, aerospace engineering, right? Like those are the kinds of things that people are going to be pursuing. Um, and so now you actually have more talent that you can choose from to work on these highly specialized problems that can really change the world in a number of ways. Like I'm thinking about, space travel or, chip design or self-driving cars. Um, it doesn't even necessarily have to be or robotics, that's another one, but it doesn't even have to be with respect to electronics or um, anything like that. It could also be, um, you know, the world of pharmaceuticals, right? Like we could end up going into an era in which um and yeah, I know pharmaceuticals aren't hardware. It's a separate thing, but this is just a separate point that I'll make, which is that some of these people might end up going into the healthcare field and make these amazing discoveries that will help with, cancer treatment, um, you know, treatment for diabetes, treatment for Alzheimer's, dementia, and reverse aging. Like these kinds of things are really going to be the forefront of this century, in my opinion. Um, though I would still argue that hardware is the better opportunity, just because the compliance for hardware is it's a lot simpler to get around compared to the healthcare world. Not to mention, I would argue that making progress in the world of hardware is a lot easier than healthcare for a number of reasons. I think AI is going to accelerate hardware a lot more. But again, I'm not really qualified to talk about healthcare or anything like that. I tend to know a little bit more about hardware, and I know much more about software and AI agents. And really, the core of this video is kind of a part two of the last one, which is that I just think that AI agents and software in general, um, I don't think you're going to see these massive companies being built anymore. I think that Anthropic and OpenAI are kind of the last of its family, essentially, right? Like the idea that you can just write code and the quality of the code is just so much better than your competitors that you can turn it into a $100 billion company or a $1 trillion company, or beyond, right? We're going to see how big these guys get, but I think those days are gone. I think these guys are the last of their kind, and I think that if VCs really want to do well, they're going to have to get into hardware or healthcare. Um, and so we'll see. We'll see what happens, but those are my predictions. So yeah, that's my video for today.